ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts, oh let the ancient words impart.
We basically went through different lines of prophecy to show that you can relate to midnight as a point in time, but also as what? A period of time. That prophetically is how long? 1 hour. And I was saying for us, in our history, the midnight hour can be understood as beginning in 2014 and coming all the way to the way mark we usually call midnight, right? Yes?
Yes.
But we noticed also that there is a structure that you can begin to establish within this history from 2014 to midnight, with this middle way mark, the prediction before midnight, dividing prophetically these two portions of history into two parts. So this hour can be divided into a half hour and half hour. And when we go to Revelation chapter 8, we are told about half an hour. And what we are told is that when the seventh seal is opened, there is silence for half an hour, there is no noise. And generally, silence in heaven is identifying a major change in salvation history, or what we usually call a change in dispensation. But also, our brother Tabu has taken us through lines of prophecy that show us that when the Temple of Solomon was built, how was it built? There was no noise. It was reared up noiseless. And I'm saying this silence corresponds to the no noise of the erecting of the temple, which is in the same history. From 2014, when the foundations are finished, up to the prediction before midnight, where the dedication of this temple begins. In Millerite history, what opened up the seventh seal for them, according to Sister White, was Ezra 7:9. We read that yesterday, right? The decree of Artaxerxes, that's contained in Ezra chapter 7. Ezra 7:9 opened up the seventh seal for them, and Millerite history is repeated to the very letter today. So when we see an increase of knowledge, a clarification of Ezra 7:9, then we know we've reached the point in what? When the seventh seal begins to be opened, right? Yes? Okay. So when the seventh seal begins to be opened in 2014, the temple begins to be noisily read up, there's silence, there's a change in dispensation. And I was saying that change is from the recording of the deeds in the judgment of the living to the review of the books. And maybe just by way of asking, we'll ask this now. Who is it that goes through the judgment of the living beginning at 9/11? Is who? It's the priest. Why do we say it's the priest?
Because the priest recognized that event.
Because the priest recognized that event. If you go to Millerite history, October 22nd, 1844, Sister White says the investigative judgment began. Yes? But does everyone go through this investigative judgment? No. Who does she say goes through this investigative judgment? Those who enter the service of God. Right? Those that actually understand the work that Christ is doing from October 22 onwards. Right? Yes. Now, when did the judgment of the living begin? 9/11. Does the leadership of Adventism know that? So can they be part of that judgment of the living? Does the majority of Adventism understand that Christ is now doing the work of judging the living? So can they be part of that judgment? Who are the only people on the earth who understand the work that Christ has been doing since 9/11? It's the priest, it's us. So who are those that are undergoing judgment? It's us. Right? So you've got to change from recording in terms of prophetically as a movement to review of the cases of those that profess this message. And that's a very solemn thought, because we've been 3 years into that phase of the judgment. And at any time, Sister White is clear that our names can be called out. And we cannot afford to take chances with our probationary time. But what we are told also when the seventh seal is opened is there's an angel that comes to the altar, and he takes the incense, which is the merits of Christ, and he mingles it with what? With the prayers of the saints. Right? Is it not so? To him was given much incense that he might offer it with the prayers of the saints. So you've got Christ's intercessory work. But Christ's intercessory work is taking place within the context of a judgment that has been put in place. Because once the seventh seal is opened, the next thing that John sees is what? 7 trumpets. He sees a message to do with the trumpets, right? And I'm saying at the end of the world, who are the trumpet powers? According to this chart, Islam is the trumpet power. But if you go further into prophetic exposition, which we might not be able to do together here, you'll find that Russia is also a trumpet power. It has been typified by the third trumpet, the Hans, and the Attila. So Russia is also a trumpet power, but you also find that the Protestants that bring in the Sunday law crisis are also a judgment from God. They are also a trumpet power. And these 3 powers were all active in 2014. Islam, ISIS declared itself a caliphate. Russia annexed Crimea, involved itself in the Ukrainian revolution in a bid to stop Ukraine from joining the military alliance of the Western powers, because there's this struggle for world supremacy. But then you also have the Christian right, or the Protestants, taking control of both houses of Congress. And Sister White is clear that it's the congressmen, the legislators, that are going to be at the forefront of the movements for Sunday legislation. So you've got these 3 judgments put in place, but they don't begin to sound. In other words, they're restrained, they don't begin their work in 2014. Reason being, Christ still has to do the final intercessory work for the priest. He needs to build the temple. He needs to dedicate the temple. He needs to ensure that God's people who are faithful are prepared for the crisis, for the trumpets that begin to sound when? At midnight. So in these judgments, Islam begins its work as a caliphate at midnight. Russia begins its work in devastating the West at midnight. The Protestants begin pushing for Sunday legislation at midnight. Are you understanding what I'm saying? All these movements begin at midnight, but you can see the powers already in place before midnight, because it's a progressive development. But while Christ is doing this final intercessory work of reviewing the records of the priests, because that's what he's doing, reviewing the records of the priests with the Father, and pleading in behalf of those who are penitent and are fulfilling their responsibility. What are we supposed to be doing on the earth? While Christ is doing that work? Putting away sin, meaning having a genuine prayer experience. Because if you're to have a genuine prayer experience where you know the Lord will answer you, you can't be regarding iniquity in your experience, can you? If you cling to sin, then you're not having a genuine prayer experience. And what are we to pray for? Based on what I was saying yesterday. There are many things we're supposed to pray for, but based on what I was saying yesterday, what are we to pray for? We're to pray for the latter rain in the time of the latter rain. Right? That's Zechariah chapter 10:1. And what does the Lord do in response? What does Christ do as his people pray? How does he respond? We're told that he takes what? He takes fire from the altar and he casts it to the earth. Right? And I'm saying this fire is in the form of coals. And if you go to Ezekiel chapter 10, which we turn in, maybe we will have time to go through it, but we won't go through it now. Ezekiel chapter 10 is about the purification of God's church. When coals are taken and cast into the streets of Jerusalem. And when a coal was taken in Isaiah chapter 6 and put upon the lips of Isaiah, what was he told? Your sin is purged, your iniquity is taken away from thee, right? And I'm not denying that that work began at 9/11, but it's progressive, it's a progressive work. And the final phase of that work of taking the iniquity of Isaiah and purging his record, I'm saying began in 2014, right? And you've got this purification, so coals are a symbol of purification, and Sister White identifies it. And as a movement, the movement is purified through what? Through messages, yes, but also through a shaking, right? There's a shaking that begins here when the fire is cast down, when these messages begin to open up, which are the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, in a special sense, you've got a purification of the movement, and the purification of the movement involves the removal of those that are not genuine, right? There's a shaking that begins here and does not end until the church is purified. Does that make sense? So when you see all these disputes within our movement, all these arguments, all these shakings, you mustn't relate to them as interpersonal issues. That, this individual has issues with this individual. Elder Jeff has issues with Mark Bruce. or Future for America has issues with Tree of Life, Future for America has issues with Path of the Just, Future for America has issues with this ministry, but this individual has issues with that individual. We need to understand things for what they really are. Because we are in the time of the shaking, and as we're in the time of the shaking, when these different disputes come into our movement, whatever they look like, whether people say it's because he doesn't have a nice way of saying things, he's rude, or it's kingly power, whatever argument is used, you need to understand that it's not about personality. What is it about? It's about the prophetic narrative. It's telling us the time in which we are in the time when those things are supposed to happen, right? And they're supposed to happen because intruders came into our movement. Remember, during the question and answer yesterday, we mentioned it. We talked a bit about the parable of the wheat and tares. And we said before you sow the seed in the field, what do you have to do to the field? Prepare the fields. And in Christ's day, who did the work of preparing the field? Preparing the way for the coming of the Messiah. John the Baptist, the first message. And for us, the first message arrived in 1989. You've got a preparation work, plowing of the field. When you get to 9/11, the field is ready to receive what kind of seed? Good seed. So the movement has been good from the beginning. And when you get to 9/11, this movement is prepared to receive the wheat. It's prepared to receive the righteous because it's the church triumphant. But because there was no due diligence, while men slept, what happened? Intruders come into the church triumphant. Intruders come in to the movement. Simply because men slept, even the householder slept, right? And the householder can represent Christ at one level, but it can also represent Christ's representatives within the movement. And I was suggesting to you that the subject upon which this movement slept was on the subject of what? Organization. Because without organization, anyone can come into this movement and do what they want. Is it not so? I can just come up, profess to believe these charts and teach you whatever I want. And I can go scot-free. I can get away with it. There's nothing you'll do to me. Then I go to the next group and I do the same, and I go to the next group and I do the same. And I profess to be this message. Not so? Yes, so there hasn't been due diligence in terms of organizing. But when you come to midnight, when the cry begins, which I'm saying for us is 2014, what happens to the virgins? When the cry is given, what happens to the virgins? They awake, right? They wake up. They begin to wake up. This truth was put in place before 2014. It became a point of a major shaking point and a serious subject of the prophetic narrative in 2014, which is the study of the covenant lines. Right? If you go to that first prophecy school that was done in 2014, Eating the Hidden Manna, one of the truths that was firmly put in place there and became present truth in a special sense, I'm saying, is the covenant lines. And what the covenant lines basically teach is that at the time when God is passing by a covenant people, He's at the same time entering into covenant with another covenant people, right? He did it in the wilderness. While the rebels in the wilderness were dying, He entered into covenant with Joshua and Caleb and all those that were under 20, that were under the age of accountability, right? In the time of Christ, while He was passing by the Jewish church, He was entering into covenant with the Christian church, right? And the more you get into the details of these covenant lines, you'll notice that the people that God was entering into covenant with, what did He do to them? He organized them, right? So the line of organization becomes especially present from 2014 onwards as it progressively begins to develop. So this movement now begins to be woken up to the subject of organization. Because what will organization assist the movement with? Hello. Yes, it will start protecting the movement from intruders. Because once certain, one element, one indispensable element of church organization is what? Church discipline. Is it not so? Yes. One indispensable element or aspect of church organization is church discipline. How to deal with unruly elements in the church. Does the movement have any of that in place at the moment? Does it? No, it doesn't. So I can come here and do anything I want, and you can't do anything to me. You won't do anything. Can you do anything to me? Except maybe, which you shouldn't do, try and use physical force to deal with me. But at an organizational level, as it stands, there's nothing much you can do to me if I come and cause havoc in this group. So organization becomes a testing, a point of testing. This movement begins to be a walk into the subject of organization. Because it's organization, of course the presenting of the message, but it's organization that's going to help in the work of what? Purifying this movement, is what I'm saying. Organization will purify this movement of all sinners, of all the intruders, because they were never supposed to be there in the first place. Are you following? Okay. So I was saying, if you have a judgment station here, which is the 7 trumpets, the symbol of the judgment is the 7 trumpets, which angel does the work of judgment, punishing? It's the 3rd angel. So if the judgment arrives here, what arrives here? The 3rd angel arrives here, but he doesn't begin his work in terms of punishing, but he's got another work that he does before he executes judgment. What does he do? He investigates, or he selects, because remember, he selects, then he binds. He investigates, which is the process of selection. He's going through the city, and then he's selecting this one, setting a mark upon him. He's passing by this one, he goes to the next one, sets a mark upon him. It's the work of selection. Then after that, you've got the men with slaughter weapons. What do? It's the same angel, but it's representing a different work. What do? They go through the city and do? Smite, they slaughter, right? So, judgment is stationed, the 3rd angel's arrived. The 5 men with slaughter weapons are there from the beginning, are they not? In Ezekiel 9. You understand Ezekiel 9? It doesn't say the 5 come later, they're there from the beginning. But the first one who's sent is the men with what? With the writer's inkwell. That go through the city, set a mark upon the men that sign, that cry, that fulfill the conditions of the gospel. And then, following right behind him is the men with what? Slaughter weapons to execute divine judgment. So, I'm saying the judgment is stationed here, but then it's executed later. Are you following what I'm saying? Okay. So, the other thing we looked at is when we look at this prophetic structure of these 2 periods within the midnight hour being divided equally into 2, one of the things you can do is take different periods. The one I took is Christ's history, though there are others you can take, of him confirming the covenant with many for how long? 1 week. So, what's happening from 2014 to midnight? What is Christ doing? He's confirming the covenant. I'm saying this is the final portion of confirming the covenant with the priest. And of course, beginning the work of confirming the covenant with the Levites. And in AD 27, okay, I can come to this point now, which is the same line. In AD 27, when Christ began the week, he began it with his baptism, did he not? And when he was baptized, became the anointed one. A divine symbol came down, right? So I'm saying in 2014, a divine symbol came down, and what's that divine symbol? It's the 3rd angel. In our history, it's the 3rd angel. And in Millerite history, AD 27 was typifying what? 1814. In 1840, did a divine symbol come down? But when he came down, what did he have? He had a book in his hand, and what did he require John to do? Eat it. And what did it taste like? Honey, right? If you go to the wilderness wanderings, what is it that the children of Israel ate that tasted like honey? It's manna. When you come to 2014, when the 3rd angel arrives, what did he have in his hand? And what was the first prophecy school that was put in place in 2014? Eating the hidden manna. Was that a coincidence? No, it was providence, right? But we are saying 2014 for the priest is what we mark. Or it's the beginning of what hour? Midnight hour. And at midnight, what is the message that's given? Behold, the bridegroom cometh. And in the same year, what was the follow-up prophecy school to the eating of the hidden manna? Behold, the bridegroom cometh. So these are divine confirmations, even through the names of these prophecy schools, that this structure is correct. But you come to the cross, when Christ is lifted up, And so we come to the prediction before midnight. What begins happening to this movement? If Christ was lifted up, what begins happening to this movement? You're not understanding. It's a simple answer because I gave you the answer. But if Christ was lifted up at the cross, what begins to happen to the movement?
Draw men to himself.
The movement begins to be lifted up. Was that difficult? Christ is lifted up at the cross. The cross is PBM. So what happens in PBM?
Drawing.
Can you be lifted up? What does it mean that we begin to be lifted up? Organization, no. It's too late to begin organizing prediction. What does it mean that we begin to be lifted up?
Being noticed.
We begin coming into public notice. Remember, there was a question that was asked yesterday about the hiding and coming out of hiding. And when we are hidden, we are obscure. We can't be seen. But when you get here, we begin to attract public notice, even though it's progressive, but it begins here, right? And when Christ was lifted up, was it a nice lifting up? Was it something you could smile about? It wasn't a nice process, right? So when we're coming to public attention here, it's not that we're going to become famous, right? We're not going to become famous, but we're going to become infamous. You know what it means to be infamous? Covered with infamy. We're going to be known for all the wrong reasons. That's what's going to happen in this movement, right? There's going to be slander. There's going to be a debate. There's going to be all sorts of things to bring out this movement in a negative light. And that process begins in earnest at the prediction before midnight, right? But anyway, moving beyond that, you come to the shut door on October 22nd, which is midnight, right? And that's the shut door for the priest. Yes? Now, another truth that you can put in place here is, shortly after Christ was baptized, what did he begin to do?
Began to ordain.
He began to gather his disciples, and he ordained them. So, shortly after 2014, what do you expect to begin? A selection process of Christ's disciples within this movement. And doing what? Ordaining them. Ordinations. And have ordinations begun? Have ordinations begun? Yes, they began in 2016, officially. So, is it part of the prophetic narrative? Is it time for ordaining? Is it time for ordination? Is it time for ordination or not? Because if Christ was baptized here, and was saying it's 2014, and shortly thereafter he began to ordain his disciples. Shortly after 2014, we would expect an ordination to begin, is it not so? And has that work begun?
Yes.
Is it a divine work or a human work based upon these prophetic lines? It's a divine work, right? So the work that happened in 2016, even though people might look at it and think it was humanly motivated, based on these lines, God is the one who ordained that it takes place. Are we following this? Okay. So now another thing that I want us to look at. Another thing before I move on is you'll find that preceding Christ's baptism was what? John's message, right? And John's message was pointing forward to the baptism of the Messiah. Is it not so? John's message was formalized. And then also in 1840, preceding 1840, there was what? There was a prediction in 1838 that was fulfilled in 1840. And it was 2 years before, roughly. But you can relate to it as 3 years, 1838, 1839, 1840, right? So also in our history, about 2 years before, 3 years, depending on how you reckon it, what happened? You had a formalization of the message. Habakkuk's tables, you have John's message, and I'm saying John, in this context, is Elder Pippinger. He put together this message, right? So you've got Habakkuk's 2 tables, I'm saying, as the symbol of John's message, the formalization of this message, right? But also in the same year, you have what? It's on the board. You have Habakkuk's tables and you have a prediction. That was given by who? Joseph Parmenides, right? He and his group of providentially led to begin to understand this 126 from 1888 to 2014. And was it fulfilled? Yes, it was. Even though most people in this movement, if not all, didn't understand the significance. Back in retrospect now, and we're seeing that it was actually a fulfillment of prophecy. That prediction was correct, right? Even though the details of it were not clearly understood in 2012, I'm not dealing with that. But 2014 as a waymark was identified in advance. So what you have is a repetition, a confirmation that this structure is actually correct. Now, just one point before we move on, I was just reminded about this 126. How many 126s do we have in our history? 2. How many 2520s are there in history? There's 2. There's I'm going to remove this. Can I remove it?
Yes.
We're saying there's 2 2520s. One that began in 723, and the other one, and it ended in 1798. And you can divide it equally into 2. 1260 and 1260. And you have pagan desolation, and also papal desolation. Then you have the second 2520, which began 677 and ended in 1844. And I'm saying each of these 2520s, even though generally they are teaching the same truth of the scattering and the gathering, but they emphasize different thoughts. I'm saying this 2520, the first one, is emphasizing pagan and papal desolation that come against God's church. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Then I'm saying the second one is emphasizing the covenant, the breaking of the covenant and the renewal of the covenant, right? The breaking of the covenant and the renewal of the covenant. And in the beginning of the punishment, when the covenant was broken, who began this punishment? And what was the first step taken in fulfilling this punishment? The breaking of the pride of power, which was their king. So leadership is broken at the beginning of the 2520, right? But I said, at the end, what do you have? When the covenant is being re-established, the leadership is restored, right? Because Christ becomes the King of Judah. He goes to the Ancient of Days to receive a kingdom, right? But in our history, what is our 2520? So now I also ask the question. It's the 126. So we have 2 126s. And I'm saying the first 126 began in 1863 and ended in 1989. Now you can divide it into half and it gets to 1926, which was 3 years before. Okay, never mind. We're not getting to that. But from 1863 to 1989 is 126 years. And I'm saying the emphasis of that 126 is how Adventism is desolated by pagan philosophy, pagan teachings, pagan ideas, and papal doctrine. Are you following? Because both were found in destroying these truths. Right? You had a Hellenistic type of education entering into Adventism, and Hellenism it's Greek philosophy, it's pagan philosophy. Right? That was used to undermine these truths. But you also have papal theories that were also incorporated into Adventism within this history. So you have both pagan and papal desolation from 1863 to 1989. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I'm saying this second 25, 21, 26 would be from 1888 to 2014. And I'm saying in 1888, there was a leadership that was broken. Which leadership was broken in 1888? Sorry? As Adventism was breaking God's covenant by rejecting truth, which leadership was broken in 1888? Sorry? The leadership of Adventism, the SDA church leadership. Because who was at the forefront of rejecting the 1888 message? It was the leadership of Adventism, right? And I'm saying from 1888 onwards, the leadership is bypassed. I know the process is completed 9/11, but that's really the end of the road for Adventism leadership. Why am I saying that? Let me see if I can illustrate this in an easy way. From 1863 to 1989, you can mark how many generations? 4. This is 1888. This is 1919. Then this is 57. Right? First generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation. And within the fourth generation, Adventism is destroyed. And I'm saying you can mark these 4 generations in the history of Saul, King Saul. Right? And in the history of King Saul, you can mark 4 mistakes. 4 mistakes that lead to his death. And what do you think these 4 mistakes would represent? The mistakes that take place in these 4 generations in Adventism. Right? What's the first thing that happens to Saul? Maybe that's a bad question. But in order for Saul to become a subject of Bible history, it was when what was happening? What was happening in Israel? What was about to happen to Saul when he is now introduced into Bible history? Anointed to be king, right? He's becoming king. So a king is set up. When did Adventism receive a king? It's in 1863, right? You have the first president in 1863, right? That's when I'm saying Saul becomes king. And if you go to 1 Samuel, you just want to quickly look at how much time do you have left? How many?
40 minutes.
40? Really?
Yeah.
You started what time? Started 7:30. 7:45.
7:25.
Oh, 7:25. Okay. So 1 Samuel chapter 13. Interesting. I didn't notice that it's chapter 13. 1 Samuel 13. And 13 is a number of rebellion. You see the beginning of Saul's rebellion in chapter 13. So I won't read the whole thing, but Saul was instructed by Samuel, go and wait for me, and then I'm going to come and offer sacrifice. But he didn't do that. If you go to verse 6, it says, when the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were distressed, then the people did hide themselves in caves and in thickets and in rocks and in high places and in pits. And some of the Hebrews went over Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was yet in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. 8. And he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were what? Scattered from him. So this is the beginning of his reign as a king. you've got a period of 7 days associated with it. And I'm saying 7 days prophetically can be related to as the 7 times. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because 7 years is called a week in Genesis 29 and in Daniel 9. But a week is how many is what actually? It's 7 years. It's 7 days. So prophetically to be 7 years, it's 7 times. So we've got a 7 times associated with Saul tarrying here. And it says the people were what from him? Were scattered. So we've got a 7 times of the scattering. It's the 7 times about the scattering. It is. Verse 9. And Saul said, bring hither a burnt offering to me and peace offering. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, what hast thou done? And Saul said, because I saw the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered themselves together at midnight. Therefore said I, the Philistines will come down now upon me to Gilgal, and I have not made supplication unto the Lord. I forced myself therefore, and offered a burnt offering. And Samuel said to Saul, thou hast done what? Foolishly, thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. But now thy kingdom shall what? Shall not continue. The Lord had sought him a man after his own heart, and the Lord had commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. And I'm saying, when you come to 1863, when Saul becomes king, this is where he begins his mistakes. Because what does he do? He's under mental pressure, is he not? He's under so much pressure, and he's connected with the 7 times, and the people are scattered from him, and he goes against the commandment of the Lord. Does he not? He goes against the commandment of the Lord, and what does he do? He does the work that he's not supposed to do. He's a king, state power, and he does what? And he takes a priestly role, which is a combination of what? Church and state. You have a combination of church and state in 1863. Yes, when the church became a legal entity. I'm not getting into the rights and wrongs of it, because I don't know. I'm just marking it as a characteristic that in 1863 you had church and state coming together as Adventism became a legally state-recognized entity. I get what I'm saying? That's what I'm marking. And in the same year, what's rejected? What's set aside? The 2520. And who is it that set it aside?
The kings.
It's a leader, right? You would argue he's the first leader of Advent. He did reject it. Why did Saul do what he did?
There was so much agitation about it.
Because he was under pressure. Why did James White set aside the 2520? The 7 times? Because he was under pressure. Sister White is clear in Testimonies, volume 3, page 12, I think, that he was under so much mental pressure and his mind was not fit for study or writing in 1863. Shortly thereafter, he set aside the 2520. So do you see the first mistake? And what began was the scattering of Miller's Jews. And I'm saying, from that point, what did the Lord say? And I'm saying Saul is not so much representing James White as an individual, but the corporate body, the House of Adventism, right? And Adventist leadership, generally. What was the Lord's testimony after that rebellion? Your kingdom shall not be established. So from 1863 onwards, what do you know about Adventism? Its days are numbered from 1863 onwards. It says that your kingdom shall not be established, because what has God already done in advance? He's already sought himself a man after his own heart. Even though that man comes later on, but he's already been what? Identified. Right? And that man was who? David. So if you turn to, want to go to the second mistake, chapter 15. Second mistake. In chapter 15, I'm not going to read it, but he was sent by the Lord and he's told, go and kill all the Amalekites. Go and destroy them. Utterly wipe them out. Because they were the eternal enemy of God's people, right? And they had to utterly destroy them so that they had peace in all their borders. Yes? But what did Saul do? He spared them. Spared the king, spared the fatlings, because he wanted to exalt himself, right? In the eyes of the people. So he was given a command and he rejected that command. Yes? Was there a message that was given to Adventism that was designed to finish the work, to destroy our enemies? What's that message? It was the 1888 message. Because Sister White is clear that had the 1888 message been received, God's people would have been prepared for the Sunday law, they would have finished the work and have gone to heaven. Right? But that didn't happen, because what did Saul do in 1888? He rejected the word of the Lord. Right? He rejected the word of the Lord for his personal reasons. And then if you go to verse 22, it says, and Samuel said, "Yet the Lord has great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity, and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected thee from being king." So what did the Adventist leadership enter into from 1888? It's spiritualism, right? Spiritualism, because setting your word above God's word, rejecting the word of the Lord in favor of your word is spiritualism. And when you get into the second generation of Adventism, Adventism is entering into spiritualism, right? Because from this point onwards, after rejecting the 1888 message, you now have the inroads of all these false teachings into Adventism. The daily being Christ Sanctuary ministry becomes prominent in Seventh-day Adventism. You've got Kellogg's pantheism gaining prominence in Adventism. You've got the Holy Flesh movement gaining traction in Adventism. And all these other different ideas because of the rejection of truth. Do you see that? Do you see that?
Yes.
So the rejection of the word of the Lord became witchcraft to Adventism. But then he says also, because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, this is my point. He has also what? Rejected thee from being king. And that's what I'm saying. 1888 is the second 126, and the king is deposed. The Lord has rejected that leadership. It's over by the time you get here. Are you getting me? The leadership is deposed. Because of what he did in 1888, that's the end of the road, even though that process had begun in 1863. And then his third mistake is in the same chapter. Because if you go to verse 27, it says, "And as Samuel turned about to go away, he laid hold upon the skirt of his mantle, and it rent. And Samuel said unto him, The Lord hath rent the kingdom of Israel from thee this day, and hath given it to a neighbor of thine that is better than thou." So what does the Lord then say after, when he does his third mistake? What is his third mistake? Tearing Samuel's mantle. And what is the mantle a symbol of? I'll give you a clue. When Elijah was about to leave the earth, what did he do? He appointed Elisha as his successor. And what was the symbol of Elisha's call to the prophetic office? The mantle, because Elijah took his mantle and put it on Elisha. So what is the mantle a symbol of? The prophetic office, right? The prophetic office. So when Saul took a hold of Samuel's mantle and tore it, what was he doing? He was what? He was ripping apart or tearing the prophetic office. Right? When did that happen in Adventism? It happened in 1919. In the 1919 Bible conference, what happened? Particularly on the 30th day of the conference. We have a man by the name of Herbert C. Lacey who stood up and basically tore apart the authority of the spirit of prophecy. The writings of Ellen G. White. She was dead already. But you come to 1919, they officially set aside, they tear apart the prophetic authority, the writings of Sister White, the authority of the writings of Sister White. Are you getting me? So I'm saying that was the beginning of the third generation, that was Saul's third mistake, tearing the prophet's mantle. And when he did that, what did Samuel then prophesy? What did he predict? What did he tell him? Because you've done this, then your kingdom has been rent. It's taken away from you officially. and it's given this day, meaning in this generation, it's taken from you and it's given to who? To David. So when does David begin to appear? Based on this story. He begins to appear here in the third, because it was in the third mistake that it's mentioned, right? Before Saul committed his fourth mistake. Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's within this history. This is the third mistake. This is this day that Samuel is talking about. And it's interesting. I said this 25-20 you can divide into two, right? 1260, 1260. I'm sure you can do the same with 677 to 1844, but I don't know what it will be teaching. In our history, you divide 1863 to 1989, you get to 926. I don't know what it's teaching. But if you divide the 126 into two periods of 63 and 63, right? What year do you get to? What year do you get to? 1888 plus 63.
1951.
1950? 1951. Who knows what happened in 1951? 1951 was the birth of the Reformer within the third generation. So when you look at that prophecy, it says, you rent the mantle in the third generation, and this day the kingdom is rent from thee and given to thy neighbor that is better than thou. And in that same generation, the third generation, the reformer of this generation is born. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. Then what was Saul's fourth mistake that basically brought him to an end? I'm sure we all know it. Most of us should know it. What brought him to his death? What was his last mistake? When he went to the witch of Endor, that was his last mistake, right? And I know we say it's within the fourth generation. He goes to the witch of Endor in 911, I'm not denying that. But you could even argue that he goes before then. But when you get to 911, this is it's progressive. It's the final manifestation that Saul has really turned his back on God and turned to spiritualism, to idolatry, to the witch of Endor. Are you getting me? And he dies. Yes? Are you following? So, the only reason why I went through all this is so that I show you that this 25-20 is emphasizing the breaking of the covenant, the re-establishment of the covenant, the rejection of a leadership, the breaking of the pride of power, the removal of a leadership, and the restoration of a leadership and a host, right? So when you come to 1888, a king is rejected. The leadership of Adventism is rejected. But when you get to the end of this 126, what do you expect to take place?
Establishment.
A leadership to be restored, right? So from 2014 onwards, God will begin to identify, bring to view to this movement who his appointed leadership is in his re-establishment of the covenant with the church triumphant. Are you understanding me? Are you understanding me?
Yes.
So it makes sense that from 2014, what begins to be put in place? Because in 2014, even though it had been a fact before 2014, it's in 2014 that it's really nailed down and put in the public record in this movement that Elder Jeff fulfilled the role of the reformer of this generation. So God begins to open up who his appointed leaders are. Shows you Elder Jeff is an appointed leader. You come to 2016, 3 men are ordained. These are my appointed leaders because it's the end of this scattering period, right? The leadership is being restored. Do you see that? Are you following? Yes. So all these things are divine. How much time do I have? Let me just check it. Okay, I'll just put one more concept in place and we end and go for breakfast. If we come to this line, this is the cross, right? And I'm placing the cross at 9/11. Why am I placing the cross at 9/11? Can you place the cross at 9/11?
Yes.
Why?
The first 3 feasts are a symbol of the everlasting gospel.
Okay, the first 3 feasts are a symbol of the everlasting God. So you mean Passover, unleavened bread, and okay, that fits. It fits. I'm not denying it. I'll try and use a simpler one. Very simple. What happens at 9/11? What message arrives? Second angel, right? And what does the second angel identify? Rejection of truth, right? Babylon falls because she has rejected truth. Yes? And the cross was that a rejection of truth. Can you represent the cross as a rejection of truth? Yes, more than anything, it was a rejection of truth. But when Christ was crucified and put in the grave, he then what? Shortly thereafter, he resurrected. And when he resurrected, what did he do? He ascended to heaven, right? Because remember, when Mary saw him, he told her, don't restrain me. I go to my Father and your Father, because he wanted to ensure that his sacrifice was accepted, right? What feast typified the cross? Passover. What did you do in Passover? Passover. Like in the feast, what was done in Passover? Eat what? To eat the flesh and drink the blood of the Son of God. Were you not required to do that? Yes or no?
Yeah.
When are we required to eat at the end of the world? It's at 9/11 when the angel of Revelation 18 comes down, right? So when Christ, so 9/11 can represent that period of the cross. But then he resurrects and he ascends, right? Is there an angel that ascends in 9/11?
Revelation 7.
If we go to Revelation chapter 7, quickly. Revelation 7, beginning in verse 1. Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. It says, and after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And Sister White tells us that these 4 winds are represented as an angry horse, and the angry horse of Bible prophecy is Islam, because the spirit of the prophets are subject to the prophets. So this is identifying the restraint of Islam, and the restraint of Islam was at 9/11. Then verse 2 says, and I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the voices to whom it was given to rule the earth and the sea. And then it goes on. So when the 4 winds are held, John sees an angel do what? Ascend out of the east. And Christ, when he resurrected, he ascended to heaven. But on the same day, what did he do? He came down out of heaven, he descended. And in 9/11 is the angel that descended. The angel of Revelation 18. So you have an ascending and a descending. 9/11. But also, when Christ resurrected, what happened also? There were others that resurrected with him, is it not so? Are there people that resurrected 9/11? Tabo took us through it a bit. The bones. If you go to Ezekiel 37, the first message causes a noise and a shaking, and a body is put together. But they are not alive. But when you come to the 4 winds, the breath comes in, and what happens to the bones? They stand up, an exceeding mighty army, right? They are alive now. And there were people who resurrected and were alive at 9/11 in this history, right? So when Christ descended, how long did he spend with his disciples?
40 days.
He spent 40 days with his disciples. And I'm saying these 40 days were from 9/11 to 2014. Because when you get to 2014, what do you have? You have Christ ascending. He goes back to heaven, right? And I'm saying that ascending is representing a change of dispensation. At a simple level. There's a change of dispensation in 2014. And I'm saying this last period is the final how many days before Pentecost? Final 10 days before Pentecost. And one of the reasons why I'm saying that is when you come to this line, which we dealt with the half an hour and the half an hour. When the 7th seal is open and there's silence for half an hour, what are the saints doing? What is Christ doing? He's mingling incense with the prayers of the saints. And when is it that the disciples were praying? It's in the upper room in the last 10 days. So the last 10 days begin 2014. Do you see that? Do we see it? And what does the number 10 represent? It's a test. So 2014 to the prediction before midnight is what? It's a test. And I'm saying it's the last test for the priest. It's a progressive test, but it's the final test for the priest that determines our eternal destiny, whether we'll be sealed or not. What is the test that determines whether we're sealed or not? According to Sister White. It's the image of the beast. So when does the image of the beast begin then? It begins 2014. And why do we say that? Why did the image of the beast test begin in 2014? Because when you come to 2014, the first major step in the setting up of church and state took place, which was the Republican Party, the Christian right, taking control, we having majority in Congress and majority in the Supreme Court, right? Just that the president was a Democrat. It was God's mercy that the president was a Democrat. But now that they have control of the judicial system and the legislative system, now they even have control of the executive branch because the president is a what? He's not only a Republican, but he is their man. Right? They rally behind him. But in 2014, you've got the steps beginning of the Christian right taking control of the United States. So the image of the beast test for the priest began right here in 2014. Are you following me? And this is the test that determines our eternal destiny. This is the test that we must pass in order for us to be what? To be sealed. Right? And I just want to read a quick quotation. Which Adventism usually uses to teach that that church won't be passed by. But I'm saying it's an incorrect reading of that. It's manuscript releases. Manuscript Releases, Volume 12, page 324. 12 MR 324, paragraph 3. Right? But I'll begin in paragraph 2. I'll begin paragraph 2 for context. 324.2, 12 MR, it says, we are to be ready and waiting for the orders of God. Nations will be stirred to their very center. Support will be withdrawn from those who proclaim God's only standard of righteousness, the only sure test of character. And all who will not bow down to the decrees of the national councils and obey the national laws to exalt the Sabbath instituted by the man of sin to the disregard of God's holy day, who will feel not the oppressive power of popery alone, but of the Protestant world, the image of the beast. So the context of the next paragraph is the what? Is the coming together of church and state, the setting up of the image of the beast, right? The implementation of these oppressive laws to persecute the saints. Yes? Are you following? That's the context. But notice the next paragraph. Satan will work his miracles to deceive. He will set up his power as supreme. How does Satan set up his power as supreme? By setting up the image of the beast is what I'm saying. And setting up of that image is progressive. Okay, might as well then go to Daniel 3, because yesterday someone asked me a question. How do you bring Daniel 3 into this? That golden image that Nebuchadnezzar erected, did it go up in one day?
No.
And then the decree is passed and you're told, bow down? No. What had to happen in reality? They had to build that image. And the Hebrew boys were watching that image coming up every day, from the base until you get up. And I'm saying, the setting up of that golden image began 2014. This is Satan beginning his work of setting up his power as supreme. Right? And he's also working miracles to deceive. He's deceiving because many delusions flood the movement from 2014. So this image is being set up. You know, the golden image is slowly but surely coming up. And you can see step after step in consolidating the power of the Christian right in the United States. Then she says within that context, the church may appear as about to fall. So when does the church appear as if it's about to fall? It's during the setting up of the image of the beast. So can it be identifying the Adventist church?
No.
No. Because the Adventist church is fallen already. It's not Babylon, but it's fallen. Honestly, because Babylon is not the only entity that falls. Go into the Bible, you find many witnesses that Judah falls. Honestly. Right? Was there no message in the days of Christ calling people out of Jerusalem? When you see Jerusalem campus dynamis, get out of it. Isn't that what Christ said?
Yes.
So, for some reason, people struggle to say Seventh-day Adventist Church is falling. It's falling. The church may appear as about to fall. So I'm saying this church is not the Adventist church. It's which church? I'm saying it's the church triumphant. It's this movement. This movement appears as if it's about to fall, but it does not fall. It remains, while the sinners in Zion will be what? Sifted out, the chaff separated from the precious wheat. This is a terrible ordeal, but nevertheless it must take place. None but those who have been overcoming by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony will be found with the loyal and true, without spot or stain of sin, without guile in their mouths. We must be divested of our self-righteousness and arrayed in the righteousness of Christ. And I'm saying it's during this image of the beast crisis, this final test for the priest before we are sealed. This is when this movement appears as if it's about to fall.
Can you read the next?
Okay, I'll read the next, but my time is up. It says, the remnant that purify their souls by obeying the truth gather strength from the trying process, exhibiting the beauty of holiness amid the surrounding apostasy. All these, he says, I have graven upon the palms of my hand. They are held in everlasting, imperishable remembrance. We want faith now, living faith. We want to have a living testimony that shall cut to the heart of the sinner. There is too much sermonizing and too little ministering. We want the holy unction. We need the spirit and favor of the truth. Many of the ministers are half paralyzed by their own defects of character. They need the converting power of God. So I know that paragraph is full of truth, but we don't have time to deal with it. But during that apostasy time period, it says those who are true and honest, those who are purifying their souls by obeying the truth, they gather strength by the trying process. Are you getting me? So I'm saying this movement since 2014 appears as if it's about to fall because it has been losing a lot of members. In the shaking that involved Path of the Just, restoring the old paths, Children of Light Ministries and others, this movement lost a lot of people, right? And following that, you've got Tree of Life, and even before that, I'm sure you had others that are, less prominent, that are just leaving the message, right? You've got Tree of Life that also caused a serious shaking. Still moving on. It's not, this movement has lost more people. And it's not just Tree of Life. You have other, personalities that have been going off into different tangents. Some teaching that the 45th president is not the last president, it's the 46th. And funny enough, you've got a lady that came out with a video that said Pippinger's movement is falling. When I saw that video, the first quote that came to my mind was this quote, that she doesn't understand. His movement might appear as if it's about to fall, but it does not fall. It remains. Because what's going on? The sinners in Zion are being sifted out, the chaff being separated from the precious wheat since 2014. It's a terrible ordeal. It's a painful process because, some of these people, many of these people are people you wouldn't have expected to be involved in that process, people you would have had confidence in. But the Lord is allowing this so that we learn to rest our faith more on the prophetic word than on personalities, because personalities can fail us. And the Lord is also allowing it to happen so that we are divested of our self-righteousness and do not trust in ourselves, right? Trust in our abilities to navigate through this process successfully, because we can't. Alone we just can't. It's designed by the Lord to humble us in the dust if we're going to be saved. Do you follow that logic? Yes, so I'm saying this is the final test. This is the 10 days in the upper room when the sinners in Zion are being sifted out. So in closing, let's go to Acts chapter 1, because this is what I want to do. Acts chapter 1. In Acts chapter 1, this is within this 10-day period. Acts 1. Acts, yes, what did you say? Did I say wrong? X. Yeah, X. How did you say Acts? Okay, Acts chapter 1. Acts chapter 1. Let's read verse. We'll begin in verse 15, but we're not going to read all the verses. I'm just going to select a few verses. Verse 15 says, and in those days, in which days? In these 10 days, is what I'm saying. In those days, Peter stood up in the midst of the disciples and said, the number of names together were about 120. Men and brethren, this scripture must needs have been fulfilled, which the Holy Ghost by the mouth of David spake before concerning Judas, which was guide to them that took Jesus. So what just happened to Peter? Peter received an increase of knowledge. An increase of knowledge that he did not understand or could not understand until this point. Is it not so? So what was that? That was an outpouring of the Holy Spirit, was it not? Before Pentecost. It was in greater measure than before the 10 days, but of course not as much as at the end of the 10 days. But there was an outpouring. Do you see that? Because an outpouring of the Spirit is identifying an opening up of God's prophetic word. So Peter is representing someone who understood, who was now getting an understanding of what was going on. Are you getting me? Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes.
Come to understand what's going on. And then he's talking about the falling away of Judas. And are we now at a point in this movement where we are understanding what's going on? Yes. As a movement, we're beginning to understand that Judas is falling away. Right? We're beginning to understand that we're in the shaking, we're in the falling away. Judas is falling away. This is the falling away first before the man of sin is revealed. Isn't that what Paul says? The falling away has to take place first before the man of sin is revealed. Yes? Yes or no?
Yes.
So, Peter is representing people in this movement that are now understanding that we're in the falling away. And then he mentions prophecy after prophecy, which I believe we've been doing. Then verse 21, wherefore of these men which have companied with us all the time that the Lord went in and out among us, beginning from the baptism of John unto that same day that he was taken up from us, must one be ordained to be a witness with us of his resurrection. So as this movement begins to realize what's going on in the falling away, what else does the movement realize? That we need to perfect organization, right? And this is what's been happening in this history since 2014. A realization that the organizational work has to be what? Perfected. Yes? Are you following? Okay. Then verse 23, and they appointed to Joseph called Barsabbas, who was surnamed Justus and Matthias. 24, and they prayed and said, Thou Lord, which knowest the hearts of all men, shew whether of these two thou hast chosen. So what are they doing? And this is, they're praying. And they are appealing to the God who does what? Who knows the hearts of all men, and he does what? He investigates them. Does it not? He searches the heart. He investigates them. Is it not? Is it not so? So you've got the Lord now being brought into the picture, illustrating a work of investigation. Because you've got these two men. Right?
Yes.
Are you understanding what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because they pray and they say, Oh Lord, who knows the hearts of all men, show us which of these two you are choosing. And in a selection process, there's a work of investigation. And we're saying in 2014 what began? The review, the investigation of the books after the recording took place. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes.
Are you reading?
Yes.
Okay. Verse 25. That he may take part of this ministry and apostleship from which Judas by transgression fell, that he might go to his own place. And they gave forth their lots, and the lot fell upon Matthias, and he was numbered with the 11 disciples. So you've got the making up of the number, which is organization. The completion of the temple, the completion of the church triumphant is done in these 10 days. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that?
Yes.
And it's done by what? By casting lots, right? And what is casting lots a symbol of? It's a symbol of a work of judgment, because when you're casting lots, you're trying to determine something. You're trying to make a decision, are you not? Hello? Well, they're not trying to come to a decision.
No.
Is it that we're tired, hungry?
No.
Basically that. Because you're so subdued. Casting lots symbolizes judgment. When you're casting lots, you're trying to make a decision, right? So this is a work of judgment. And when does the work of judgment begin? 2014, the casting of lots, right? The searching of hearts to determine who is to be Matthias. Are you following me? And who is Matthias? What does Matthias mean? It means gift of God or an offering. So it's in this history that an offering is prepared. Remember yesterday we talked about an offering. When the angel was going through in the time of David, slaughtering the people in Jerusalem, what did David do in order to stop that work? He presented an offering. Remember? And are people being slaughtered in this movement? Or we don't believe it? People are being slaughtered because all these people that are living in numbers, the plague is in the land. Obviously, God's judgment is in the land. People are being slaughtered. And what's going to bring that process to an end? The preparation of this offering, which is representing the faithful priests that consecrate themselves fully, that fulfill the characteristics that we read in Manuscript Releases, volume 12, page 324, 325. Right? That offering is prepared, the process ends. The process of slaughtering. When Matthias replaces Judas, an apostolic number is made, and then Pentecost can come. Are you following that logic? Yes. So, you've got this judgment process that determines who it is that is to make up the apostolic number, complete the church triumphant. And what verse is it? It's Acts chapter 1, verse 26. It's 126. And 2014 is the end of the 126. Do you see that? Do you see it? Sorry? So you said something? Yes, it's the Pavona, even in verses. 2014 is the end of the 126. And in Acts 126 is identifying what's happening from 2014 onwards. The selection of Matthias, the casting of lots, the work of judgment, the preparation of the offering, so that Pentecost can come. It's not a coincidence. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for being with us up to this time and allowing us the privilege of seeing another day. Lord, we thank you for the truths that you continue to open up to us and the divine confirmations that you give, Lord, that we are in the right direction as a movement. I pray that you might help us as individuals to come into line with what the movement is teaching, Lord. May we may we purify our souls through obedience to the truth. May we gather strength, Lord, through this trying process of this shaking. That's such a terrible ordeal. We know that it is a necessity, Lord, to strengthen us for what's about to hit. I pray that you might keep us faithful. Pity us, Lord, for we are but dust. And may you give us much grace so that, Lord, we might gain victory over sin at all times and in all places. Give us your Holy Spirit to help us in this work. And be with us now as we're even going to have breakfast and the programs that follow. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.